You guys literally test every single lot that comes out.
You're testing each lot receipt, then you are confirming the quality of each lot. We don't have any gaps in our quality system, and we aren't surprised by a final outcome.
What do you want those 7 million people taking Thorne products every day to understand about what went into building them?
The culture of Thorne, our mission is to deliver the best product we can to consumers.
Welcome to Inside the Formula, a SuppCo original series where we go behind the science of supplements that have earned the Tested by SuppCo certification. Each episode, I sit down with the formulators, chemists, and scientists behind these products to find out what it actually takes to make a supplement that works.
I'm Jordan Glenn, head of science at SuppCo. My guest today is Brian Shira. Brian holds a doctorate in analytical chemistry from the University of Georgia and brings over 25 years of experience leading quality organizations across the pharmaceutical, infant formula, and dietary supplement industries. As the Senior Director of Quality at Thorne, he oversees strategic and operational laboratory leadership, managing internal capabilities and external lab partnerships to ensure product quality, compliance, and scientific integrity in support of Thorne's mission to deliver safe, effective, evidence-based solutions. Before we begin, an important reminder. Tested by SuppCo is an independent certification program that SuppCo offers as part of its business model. Brands featured in this series have paid fees to have their products analyzed by the tested program, which tests the products that consumers actually buy to verify their active ingredient claims. Test results are published transparently, pass or fail, and cannot be influenced. Today's episode includes a brand partner. And now, my conversation with Brian Shira. Welcome. Brian, how are you? Welcome. We're excited to have you on the show today.
I'm doing well, thanks. Good to see you, Jordan.
Yeah, I love this background you have going on. Nice colors, good branding. This feels great.
Yeah, great place. Glad to have it behind me.
So how's everything going today?
Yeah, everything's going great. Been a busy day at Thorne, so we're happy to be talking with you today.
Yeah, what are you working on right now?
Normal production, but some new product innovations, supporting some of that, and then helping to get product out to customers.
Awesome. I love it, man. So I want to kind of get into this because Thorne has really been around longer than most brands in the space. What was the founding conviction that really set Thorne apart from everything else that existed at the time?
Yeah, so Thorne, as the name implies, was created to be a thorn in the side of the supplement industry. And that conviction is really around having high purity ingredients, the best ingredients, not a lot of excipients and other items. And that was really driven by being a healthcare practitioner brand, and having that overall focus is necessary for practitioners to trust you. That's just carried forward. As Thorne has grown, we've continued to kind of maintain true to our origin, and we're proud of it, right? We're a much larger brand than we were back, 40 years ago, but that same DNA, that same heritage is still baked in us today.
And you know what I think is really interesting, like as you talk about, you've gotten bigger, you started a small shop, you've been the thorn in the side of the supplement industry, you continue to grow, but you've really been able to maintain this concept of quality as you've grown as a brand. And that word quality, it gets used by literally everyone. But for Thorne, what does that word mean operationally for you guys across sourcing, manufacturing, even things like testing?
Quality is just adherence to a standard, right? I talked about our heritage, and so that standard has transparency and efficacy built into it. So then you asked about sourcing first. So with sourcing, it's about getting the best ingredients, making sure we have suppliers who are in our preferred network, and we aren't typically buying commodity type ingredients. We've identified branded suppliers, and we've partnered with them to deliver what we want. And as we vet suppliers, we have a rigorous test program led by our product development and medical affairs group to help lay out what we want to see. And then ultimately working with the suppliers to get something suitable for Thorne quality, whether that's the efficacious material as far as a specific analyte, or whether it's absence of contaminants. All of those are important to, again, build trust and deliver a quality product.
So I love that. And then keep walking me through that. So like sourcing is one thing, but then you also have the manufacturing side, which is incredibly complicated, all the way through the testing piece as well.
Yeah, so manufacturing is it's a cornerstone of what Thorne does. Ingredients are great, but if you can't put them together and formulate and produce an excellent product, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. because we do manufacture, we understand raw materials, intermediates, whether it's mixing or blending, kitting, which is way up, all of those things that go together. And then eventually, for most of our products, encapsulate it into a form that a consumer can use. By having
Yeah,
that in house, we are able to kind of keep tabs on that, continue to learn from that, and control it. So we do a lot of in process checks to make sure things don't go sideways between it. And then as far as investing in clinical and testing and confirming that everything that we designed to be in there is in there, that's the core of my work as QC director.
so I love that. And so you guys have these incredibly high standards. I mean, from we'll call it soup to nuts, everything that goes into your product. So, given these standards, why did Thorne ultimately want to pursue the the tested by SuppCo certification specifically?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So why did Thorne want to have SuppCo tested? I thought about this a little bit when we had the opportunity to do a certification with SuppCo and participate in the tested program. It allowed us to hold up a mirror to ourselves and evaluate were we happy with what we were going to see reflected back to us. And the answer is yes. I mean, obviously, but it lets us be critical of ourselves. It lets us evaluate our quality and our transparency from a different viewpoint. Look back at ourselves and say, hey, where did we do this really well? Where was it, not as perfect? Where can we improve? Where did we have assumptions? Sometimes we're asked to tell a story of how science is done. Effectively, we aren't always critical enough on ourselves, and Richard Feynman, who was the Nobel laureate, had a phrase, and it's about confirmation bias, which fancy science words, but it basically, the first rule is don't fool yourself, and you're the easiest person to fool. So we want to make sure that we're asking our partners to, help us not fool ourselves, and that's really what I think SuppCo testing helps to bring, and allows us to evaluate ourselves. But then additionally, it also makes it very transparent to the consumer. All of the things that we put into our quality is able to be kind of collated and reflected and externally validated so that we can give an independent view to a consumer.
Yeah, I think that's great. And, as a fellow scientist, that concept of confirmation bias hits all too close to home. I've been there many times. You mentioned, like, as part of that, you guys do almost everything in house at Thorne. You do your manufacturing. You have this vertical integration that really allows you to control everything that's going into the supplement. Walk me through what that really means when we think about the overall outcomes and quality for Thorne's products.
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit before, but the overall outcomes of quality are really, there's a lot that can go into a manufacturing process. And so, whether it's capsule weight that you want to control, if that allows us to, essentially keep tabs on all portions of the process and keep it from going awry. So, we can make a small tweak to help keep things within our specification. But most importantly, probably for consumers, it means we know our products. And we know what we sourced, we know what we tested, we know what we put in, we know how it was made. And then that allows us to also continuously improve our product. If a consumer has an issue or a complaint, we can go back and look at how we made it. We can evaluate, what that is, so that we can continue to deliver the highest quality and the most consumer satisfying experience.
And speaking of knowing kind of what goes into your products, you guys use a lot of what are called branded ingredients across your lots. Can you walk us through what a branded ingredient means and, like, a specific example of how you've used it in your formulation?
Branded ingredients would be something that has a brand name, of course, but how is it used specifically and what does it mean? So you can buy a commodity, chemical or botanical, and it may or may not be standardized to some, active ingredient. What the branded ingredients have done is they've sort of assured that their testing is in place. They generally standardize the content so that you're getting something for the consumer that's, repeatable, that's efficacious. And Thorne takes it an additional step. And that additional step is really around having clinical trials to back up that branded ingredient. That's usually where we see the benefit of the branded ingredients is they provide that additional evidence for us to be able to design and support consumers in however the product is designed to do, whatever that is. So that's really the key of it, is having something that's beyond just the ordinary, something that someone's put the science and the rigor into in order to demonstrate, a positive product.
You mentioned efficacy, and I know for you guys, efficacy, and then another word that comes up a lot is bioavailability. And these are big North Stars, I know, for Thorne, their formulation, your decisions, but a lot of people use these words, they get thrown around. How do you define them and how do they ultimately shape what ends up in your final products?
Yeah, bioavailability is really about your body being able to use it, and there's several different ways of doing that. That could be enhancing a digestive process, right, to make sure it's absorbed well. So one of the ways we do that is we'll use phytosomes as sort of a novel delivery mechanism. Additionally, a lot of our minerals are chelated, so that way they're absorbed well into your system. So that kind of helps with the bioavailability. But then the efficacy is part and parcel. I mean, they're all interrelated. You can't, if you can't absorb it right, it's not going to be effective. So those are all well aligned. However, I would say that one of the things Thorne's done, if you look at our portfolio, like our B vitamins, we use largely the methylated versions, which are the bioactive forms, and that's intended to confer the maximum benefit to our customers. And so that that is just that's in our DNA, right? That's just core. That's been part of the thorn in the side, was not using, a a routine B vitamin. We're going to use the bioactive forms in order to further support our customers.
And you said an interesting word there, chelated. This is a term that some people may or may not even have heard of. Can you walk through a little bit what does chelated mean and why is it important for supplement?
Magnesium is one of the ones that you'll commonly see in a chelated form. So magnesium can be in an inorganic form, like magnesium oxide is a typical commodity form. And yes, it'll provide the body magnesium. The challenge there is how your body absorbs that is different depending on what it's bound to. Chelation is the process of binding it or reacting it with something like an amino acid. So you'll hear magnesium glycinate or magnesium bisglycinate is actually binding that magnesium. And that helps your body to absorb it. In the case of magnesium, it can help to minimize gastrointestinal upset. If you take excessive amounts of magnesium, you could fall into that trap, especially if it's not chelated. But there's a lot of benefits as far as how your body uses it if it is chelated. And then it's important also to get forms not only that are chelated, but also that the vendor has done a good job of chelating it. There's some that could be chelated in name only, and so you want to avoid those. And that's just core to what we do when we qualify a vendor.
And that's a good segue because like with you guys, you have a dedicated sourcing department. So when you're looking at vendors, what is this process? What does the process look like? How does a raw material get approved status at Thorne?
Yeah, so it's a long process, and I'm but one part of it at Thorne and being in the lab. But ultimately, our medical affairs department, some portion of them, they have multiple different functions, but they will identify an ingredient. And then they will go out and they will, specify this is what we want to see. If they pick a brand, we'll get samples and then we'll evaluate not just what we need every day, but there's generally additional qualification testing. That degree of chelation I mentioned an example. That could be something that could be interesting for us to have, understanding what a vendor, if it's a branded ingredient, what they measure and confirming that independently on our own through outside testing or through our internal laboratories. Those are all key pieces of identifying a profile for a new ingredient. And then, of course, the standards are, absence of contaminants, beyond, reasonable levels that are outlined in various compendia. And then, of course, we control heavy metals, microbiological criteria, things like that.
So you do all this testing on the front end when you work with the vendor, you establish the vendor, but then there's this concept in supplements called skip lot testing, where you test lots every so often. You guys literally test every single lot that comes out. Walk me through what that means in practice. What are you testing for at this point? And more importantly, what happens if something fails that testing?
Testing, as you set up a quality system, you want your quality systems to be bulletproof. So if you're testing each lot receipt, then you are confirming the quality of each lot. So if there's any variance across the lot, you'll pick that up if you have robust sampling. Skip lot testing is done largely as a cost saving measure, and it's done so that one can effectively manage a large incoming workload. The challenge is you can be blind. Now, if you have good vendors, you shouldn't need to rely on testing every single lot. But rather than push that risk to later in the process, if you had a lot that slipped through your lot selection criteria, you would be then adding a lot of value to the product. And then getting it to the finished product stage, you go to verify it, you might be surprised. Thorne has decided, and I'm very happy that we're well supported to continue, with each lot testing so that we don't have any gaps in our quality system and we aren't surprised by a final outcome. Your additional question there was, what happens if something goes wrong? Well, usually we catch it at the door coming in because we do test each lot. So that's the good news. That's the benefit. You're going to pay me now or pay me later. So we just prefer to do it up front.
No, I mean, and that makes perfect sense. So you guys have a lot of products in your inventory. It's the level of quality that you guys can maintain versus the amount of products that you actually are producing is pretty impressive. Can you talk a little bit about how you're able to manage and maintain quality as you guys continue to grow your product line?
Yeah. So I think the maintenance of quality starts with quality systems. So regardless of the scale of your company, you need to be committed first of all. And I already talked about the management support for quality and quality systems. So that's fundamental. I can't emphasize that enough. It may not be sexy, but it's the reality of what you need to do as a quality professional and to maintain standards. But then it's also the culture. And so that's applying those standards across the batch. It's ensuring that when those samples come in, they are appropriately, or when those lots come in, they are appropriately sampled and then they're appropriately tested and everyone understands their part in the chain. So having that as you grow, it's an easy scaler. You know exactly what you're going to do. You aren't going to change. So it's just executing maybe a little more often, but you also get some economy of scale as well. So that helps.
And have you ever had products or formulations that just really haven't passed testing? And then what happens then?
Yeah, so we sort of have a pharmaceutical model. It's very common in the pharmaceutical industry to have, a material review board. So if something doesn't pass testing, you would do an internal investigation, and then this, whether it's a raw material or an in-process test or a finished product test, you would do an internal investigation. Might have a simple repeat if you found something wrong, and then you would go forward if that resulted. However, if you go into repeat testing, then that's usually directed by our QC compliance group, which still kind of reports to me, but is separate from the lab to avoid that conflict of interest. So we have a separate compliance group that helps to line that up. And then ultimately, if that initial out of specification result was upheld, then it'll go to a material review board, which is a cross-functional board. It could have medical quality control, production. It could have multiple people on the material review board to review that out of specification result, which is now confirmed, and then what the outcome is. So yes, occasionally there are things that don't meet, and then they'll either be reworked or retested or rejected, depending on what it is. If it's a vendor material and it's a critical assay, it's probably working with the vendor to find replacement material and figure out what went wrong, and then getting that kind of continuous improvement so it doesn't happen again.
There's so much that happens on the front end to just making a product, but then you have the piece of it that's actually does that product work in a person? And Thorne, I think, is so interesting because you guys support everyone from elite athletes all the way through just the general person looking to optimize their everyday wellness. How do you guys think about formulation and maintain that level of integrity across a very wide range of needs?
I think as far as maintaining wellness, we put our customers first. Hopefully that comes across as I talk. We put our customers first, and we don't really differentiate whether you're an elite athlete or you're, one of our, say, 7 million customers. It's about putting our customers first. Yes, an elite athlete might benefit from a certification, NSF certification for sport that indicates it doesn't have banned substances, but our other consumers are also going to get that same benefit because we're using the same ingredients on the same line. We just, if it doesn't have that certification, we may not be testing it, but ultimately the quality and the formulation is the same. So whether it's peak performance or just supporting people on their next journey, that's what we do every day. So it's not, I guess, not to harp on it, but our customer is our customer, and we try and meet them where they are, and then give them the best possible product. And that transparency and science helps us to, really deliver the quality, as I said, with all the support of Thorne.
I mean, that makes sense, right? I mean, athletes are people too. We hear that a lot where, we're not physiologically, we're not necessarily different on that regard. So that holds. But one of the things I do see a lot is that there's a big tension between, speaking of efficacy, what science supports and then what consumers may see or what they may believe from a lot they'll see maybe online or social media, et cetera. How does your team, how does Thorne in general go above and beyond to make sure that you're able to support the claims that you're actually making?
Yes, our medical affairs group does a lot around sourcing or identifying branded ingredients that have clinical trials, and I should say relevant clinical trials as well. So I'm not the best person to speak to this, but it is important for Thorne to, identify those raw materials and then go ahead and establish that this branded ingredient with this level of marker or this phytosome system is going to deliver the support that we want. So that's ultimately what our medical affairs group does. So as far as the amount of rigor that goes into that, if we haven't identified a clinical study, then we probably are going to go search for another branded ingredient which is going to have that support. Whether it's myself or whether it's medical affairs, we need to have data to support our decision. That's what science is ultimately based on. It's not a feeling. And so we want to provide that data, and that's what drives our selection. Having said that, I think one of the more exciting things in Thorne is the launch of our AI support on our Thorne website. I think you can see there a lot of the nutritional information and the science behind how we design the product is there, and the transparency is there. So consumers can learn from hopefully what they view as a trusted source. And so if they go to thorn.com and they look at that, they can certainly evaluate some of that data, and that science should be linked in there.
Oh, that's fantastic. So on the Thorne AI on your website, your consumers can go and actually ask or validate the science behind the products that you guys are creating. Is that correct?
Yes, you'll see even in the prior iteration, there is even if you follow the web pages, you could read down and see the branded ingredients, and with a few clicks, you can probably find out all you ever wanted to know about those ingredients and some of the key clinical studies that are in there. Now, you don't have to do that; the AI will do some of that for you. But if you're one who likes to dig on your own, you can do that as well.
See, I think that's fantastic. So many people these days we hear clinical study all over the place, right? And I think people are constantly now, the consumers are getting smarter. People are getting more savvy about the supplements they're taking. I think having that information up front is so valuable. And so you mentioned a number earlier, 7 million consumers that you guys have with Thorne. What do you want those 7 million people taking Thorne products every day to understand about what went into building them? What's the thing that they should know that just never makes it onto the label?
It's hard for me to give it because you kind of already hit on it, right? It's the culture of Thorne. Our mission is to deliver the best product we can to consumers. And that is, although we're growing and all of those things, that is ultimately what we come back to. And that's the question we ask and we challenge ourselves with. And I want people to know that this is a real commitment from Thorne, right? This is core to who we are. This isn't just, marketing or whatever you want to say. It is ultimately about delivering the best to the consumer. We maintain, lists of prohibited ingredients. We test rigorously. All of those things are designed to give the best to the consumer in the end.
I love it. I love that. And so, Brian, I have a personal question for you. I want to know one supplement that you personally cannot live without, the one that you would take to a desert island. And I also want to know the one
Yeah.
supplement flying completely under the radar that you wish more people knew about.
Yeah. So I guess the one supplement, I think the magnesium bisglycinate is great. And, we have it in two forms. We have it in a powder form and then a capsule form. And I really like it. It helps with sleep, helps with muscle recovery if you're working out, if you're overall, trying to support your magnesium levels. That's one I think a lot of people can benefit from. So that's really one I would take. And I do take routinely. So that's a good one. Um, some that are flying under the radar are the ones that I think are really neat for Thorne. I'm going to give you two, but they're sort of similar. One is advanced testosterone support. So you're right, certainly designed for men, but it has branded ingredient like we talked about. It has a Shodan ashwagandha. It has a Prima V shilajit. And one thing I love about it is Thorne is invested in that because you can buy shilajit, but if you don't have a name, by having a named brand shilajit, you can be assured of the quality of that extract. And that's a difficult material to test. So that's kind of how Thorne said, hey, we really want to confer the benefits of this product, but we don't have a good way to do it. And then a parallel one, which I guess has another study, another story that's very Thorne, centric, is a newly launched product, and it's a women's libido boost. And so The backstory to that is that product has several different branded ingredients, but during formulation, we weren't happy with the clinical support for it. So we went back and we had to select other ingredients to get the proper clinical support. Really where the disconnect was there is that some of the benefits had been looked at from a male point of view and were just kind of pink washed, right? So they didn't consider women's studies. So medical affairs really pushed back and said, I want clinical studies in women. And so that product is formulated with several different botanicals in order to achieve, the right clinical profile that we wanted.
I love it. Fantastic answers. Committed to quality across the board, top down support, testing across, delivering safe, effective, evidence based health solutions. Thorne Products. Brian Shira, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Yeah. Thank you, Jordan. Have a great day.